From Dubai to now, I don't see anything that has changed. Truth be told, we keep having these negotiations religiously every year. I think we need to take a hard stop at having these negotiations. We've negotiated enough.
Countries were very deliberate about how they projected themselves. I mean, I didn't see this in Dubai, and maybe I didn't pay attention. But I saw a lot of countries who came to sell where they are in terms of what they are doing to preserve the oceans, what they are doing to preserve the forests. Whilst we are still competing for the same scarce resources, some people are positioning themselves.
Hello everyone, and welcome to this episode of What's with the Grid, a conversation with women in the power sector. This is a special episode. As our listeners might be aware, the 29th meeting of the Conference of Parties to the UN Framework on Climate Change held in Azerbaijan between the 11th and the 22nd of November this year. Just for purposes of enlightenment, this framework was agreed on in 1992 and is the parent treaty to the 2015 Paris Agreement. And we had some of our sisters very proudly flying the Nigerian flag there, some Amazons who engage in the power sector, and they're here with us today to share with us some reflections from Azerbaijan. First, we have Dolapo Kukoyi, the managing partner of Detail Solicitors. She leads the firm's energy, infrastructure and power practice. She's one of the leading lawyers in Nigeria, having worked for government agencies, regulators, private parties, institutional investors, and financing institutions. Dolapo combines her solid legal background and industry knowledge to add value to each transaction. She's also an avid speaker and thought leader and is passionate about encouraging the advancement of women in professional and business circles and increasing access in Nigeria and across Africa by leveraging private finance with viable business and project models. Now that's just a snapshot from what is obviously, in case you've missed it, a very impressive resume. So delighted to have you here this morning, Dolapo. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Stella.
And our second guest is Habiba Ali, the Managing Director and CEO of Sosai Renewable Energies Company, a company that offers efficient, reliable and sustainable products to rural and peri-urban communities of northern Nigeria. Habiba's academic journey is marked by a bachelor's degree in accounting and a master's in banking and finance. She's currently forging ahead with her doctoral studies. She sits on the National Council of the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, MAN, the Board of Advisors at Mainstream Foundation, and the National Advisory Board for Impact Investment. Habiba was the pioneer vice president of the Renewable Energies Association of Nigeria and was an advisor on the one-year GGF-funded Practitioners Dialogue for Climate Investments Program. Thank you, Habiba. And Habiba is a repeat guest, actually. Glad to have you here again. You're most welcome.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Okay, COP29. Dolapo. Was there anything there for the on-grid space at all? As someone who's worked in the on-grid space, your work has taken you across the on-grid space in Nigeria. I was just wondering about your reflections in terms of what COP29 means for, the Nigerian on-grid space, any part of the Nigerian on-grid space. Was there anything that struck you there?
In the sessions that I attended, yes, there was mention of the grid very much. One of the sessions that I spoke at with the International Solar Alliance, there were discussions about solar integration specifically, and how we could actually integrate solar into different grids. What would be the key consideration? How countries can position themselves to attract financing, particularly climate financing, the role of regulation. And there were examples from countries like Brazil, from India. I did talk about Nigeria and other African countries where we were working. There were also very good examples from Ghana. We had a gentleman from Ghana as well who came about with some very, very interesting positions on how we as Africa could position ourselves. And most importantly, when you're talking about solar integration, if we would say generally renewables integration, is how we bridge the infrastructure gap. And that would be on a national, on a regional and a continental level. I mean, if you look at the developed world, develop their grids such that it's stable and it's reliable enough to provide power to within the country as in nationally, but also to do international trade. And these are some of the key factors to when we talk about decarbonization or reducing carbon emissions, because the more you have a stable grid that caters to industrials, for example, knowing that we also have an access and industrialization dilemma, in countries like Nigeria and Africa, and we can't do without the grid. So there were very interesting discussions on how do we, with all of this, achieve universal energy access for all. And I remember there was a conversation about consumer rights, and consumers having a choice of who your supplier would be, and all of that. And I said, other countries can say this, but in a country where you have an access problem, or in a continent where you have an access problem, where people don't even have much of a choice, they don't even have the energy, we can't even begin to talk about consumer rights and the right of choice as to who will be your supplier when you just basically take what you get, if you get any at all. So it also showed the disparity, which is one of the issues that COP tries to resolve, the issues around disparity with energy access, whilst we are still talking about reducing carbon emissions. So it was an interesting discussion, and a lot of questions there.
I'm hearing a lot of things from your response. I thank you for those set of reflections. The whole question of climate finance as the great enabler for me sticks out with what you're saying. And I remember reading that there was a bit of drama. And I'm heading your way. I'm heading your way, Habiba, with this, because there was some drama with the commitment in terms of financial aid to developing countries to finance their climate transition. And then the ballpark figure that was arrived at was at least $300 billion per annum, which was upping it from $100 billion at COP28. So I'm just wondering, Habiba, what do you think of that? The 300 billion, and because I know countries like Nigeria spoke out against that. What's your take on where we're going with that?
For me, the whole issue of the 300 million and it's 35 and all of that, I was already laughing. And then I watched a clip where the Nigerian delegates also actually came out very, very strongly to fight back, sort of. You say that nearly 200 countries adopted the new collective quantified goal on climate finance. And they said it's a breakthrough agreement that will triple public finance to developing countries.
So they said.
From the previous goal of 100 billion. I want us to even think back. The previous goal, have we even achieved it? Right? Previous goal of 100 billion annually. Are we getting that 100 billion annually? So, and now you are now tripling it. What are the models? What are the plans of action? Throwing out figures in public and saying this is what we're going to do, for me, is one thing, but actually following it with action is also another thing. One of the things that people are not even talking about is the scaling up of the public and private finance of up to 2.3 trillion per year by 2035. And all of this, I'm thinking, okay, yes, this is all nice. This is all good, right? It's news that we want to hear. But what are the structures to this? And I don't know if anyone, maybe Dolapo, actually heard that come out, because for me, I didn't hear any structure. It was just figures. And so I'm still thinking, okay, if there were good structures to it, that within the next year, before COP30, where they would triple it again, and nothing still happens. What are we doing? What are the tangible actions? Are you giving me 30 million and then you're telling me in 2 weeks I'm giving you 30 million, and these are the terms that you're going to have to go through to get the 30 million? For me, this is more like something that is real. Yesterday we were at the REA and then Plateau State signing, and the governor said something like, oh, they're going to have railways in 2 years in Plateau. And I'm there thinking, do they already have existing railways and they want to clean it up? But I know that when the Netherlands, when I was studying there and they wanted to do railways, even fix the existing railways, they took 5 years. So I don't know what the plan is. And this just sounds like, how they say when you go to an event, you make promises, you make pledges, and then you never recoup those pledges. So what are the actions?
I see. Dolapo, did you hear anything by way of a strategy for actually action in this, delivering this very nice sounding figure, this $300 billion figure?
I think that those would be for people who actually attended the negotiation sessions.
Yeah. Also.
Perhaps.
Why would it be for people who attended the negotiation sessions only, though?
We would hear the feedback. So what we've heard as feedback, because the way COP is structured, there are many sessions.
Yes.
But there are the negotiating sessions where the heat is on and where the discussions are being had. But that said, there were other side sessions where discussions were being had by multilaterals, DFIs, on how they plan to be part of that. But what I would assume, because I didn't hear any specifics on how this will be structured, is that, of course, the countries, when you've made that commitment, it is one thing to make a commitment. Then how you then implement and how you even that money forward or how you bring it out will be another thing, which didn't happen with the first promise. And a lot of people attribute that to a lot of things. The world is changing. We've had a war in Europe. Politics has changed things. We don't know. We have a president who is going to support or not support. You know, we are hearing double things, whether he will or he will not. The Middle East is taking a very strong position on how they want to do it.
Yeah.
And things like that. So we will. I guess that we will hear in the coming.
Okay.
And Habiba did talk about private sector. I think one thing that was clear from my own conversations and what I heard about private sector is that there will still be no free money.
Okay.
We are all competing for the same money. And when I say we, I mean all of us as developing countries will still be competing for the same money. So it's a lot about a function of how we position ourselves. I did hear conversations where private sector was saying that they are doing a lot.
Okay.
And if you ask, they are doing a lot in mitigation, obviously now. If you ask them to go into adaptation, which is more social, they still have to see a business case and see how their returns are. Yeah. So when you talk about these big ballpark figures, it has to then be structured into which one is coming from government, in what form. Is some private financing focused? It's some more loss and damage. How do countries position themselves to get loss? And I know, for example, South Africa was able to position themselves to actually get. I think the key question we should be asking ourselves, while they are structuring, how are we
Positioning ourselves?
Positioning ourselves.
Good question.
I think that's the most important thing.
So, well placed are we to actually get this financing, and what is even the financing? Do you know from what Dolapo just shared? I was privy to a bit of what the Canadian government was saying, and this is what I mean by what is really the structure. Yeah, because when the whole announcement was made, every country is saying, "Oh, we will do this, we will do that." The thing I think I really wanted to hear is, as you say, okay, 300 billion, right? So this means, let's say what do you call this, Denmark and Iceland conglomerate, what do you call them?
The Scandinavian countries, is it?
The Scandinavian countries. You guys are going to put in 500. The Americans, you guys are going to do 100 or something like that. So everybody leaves the climate meetings with that kind of structure, because the thing is, when you leave the meetings, this announcement came, I think it's a few days before the end.
Very close.
Or maybe even the last day. Or something. So people do not even understand what this commitment means to them, right? Even though Canada is saying, "Oh, we announced," they announced over 12.5 million aimed at halting biodiversity loss. They will be supporting communities to adopt climate smart practices and empower women conservationists in Madagascar. These are just what they are saying, and that's 12.5 million. And even their own structure of how they are going to do it's something that is only open to them. So when we talk about structuring ourselves to receive this, we even need to understand where do they want to go with it, right? We need to understand what their plans of actions are. I mean, most of them will sign MOUs and say we have, there's this blank. I don't like blanket figures. I don't like
ballpark
vague announcements. Vague announcements. We're going to do $500,000 in horticulture. Where? How? How do people who really need this come to it? How do these African countries? So if you're saying, for example, when we did the PCIA and we finished, we're like, okay, yes, let's let this GCF be formed.
What's PCIA? What's sorry, listening our audience.
PDCI, sorry. PDCI, not PCI. Practitioners Dialogue on Climate Investments. We were able to say strategically, let the GGF be formed. Let this, let this amount of money be coming from each country to that purse.
Okay.
$5 million or whatever it is. And from, so let's put it together, and we know that countries can then, like when they did the Kyoto Protocol and the CDM was a fallout of it, you knew that you had to go to UNFCCC to apply for the CDM, you had to fill your PDDs. I mean, that breaking down Dolapo is now when I know at the Kyoto Protocol they said, okay, let's form the CDM, but they might not have gone into the details of this is how you come into the protocol, the thing by saying, oh, you have to write a PIA, then a PDD and all of that.
Gosh, Habiba, these acronyms, not everybody is as expert You are PDI, PPI, PPA. What is all that?
I'm sorry. Clean development mechanism was what
Okay.
came out of the Kyoto Protocol.
Right.
This is a project where the developed countries were challenged to do projects in, and what do you call them, developing countries, Annex 1 countries, to do
Okay.
projects in developing countries that will reduce climate change. This was 92 or so.
Okay.
And even though they announced it, they said the CDM was going to be developed and all of that. When I said PDDs, project design document, PIA is the project implementing, sorry, I've forgotten that one zone too, was like the first step to it. But they knew that they wanted to do CDM. And for a while, they developed the process. And for a long time, only China was cashing to the CDM, up to the point that when people started paying attention and saying, what's going on? There's a program like this that you can use to develop projects that reduce climate effects. And everybody went and saw that China was the one winning. In fact, it was at the point called Chinese Development Mechanism. It was a joke, but it was serious, right? But it took time, and then people started paying attention and realized, there's money to be made. The ton of CO2 that you could make, the amount that you could make per ton of CO2 saved per project then was up to 15 euros, which was really good, right? But with time, when everybody said, coming to it and trying to get projects done, countries are also now doing their NDC well and reducing their own emissions and all of that.
Okay.
And the CDM crashed. So what I wanted us to come out of was not to say we're going to do 300 billion, but how, what program, what mechanism, like the CDM came out, right? And then you can develop the whole plan of action. Because from Dubai to now, I don't see anything that has changed.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask that, and I was going to ask Dolapo whether, I hear the point about, we've had this conversation before, Habiba, and you actually agreed with this, that there's no free lunch, right? That there are things, this is investment. So people are looking for, value for money, return on investment. We need to be properly positioned, like Dolapo has said. But then, taking from what you said, my follow-up question, and it's really not a question, it's just a reflection. Maybe Dolapo might have something to share on this one, is how do you prepare for something when the parameters are not very clear? From what Habiba is saying, how do you, there's this figure out there, right? And that's supposed to be a commitment. Okay, I want to be part of it, or my country wants to be a part of it. Where do we even start from? When they say position, is there something we should, because there's a very good chance that countries leave without even knowing, okay, so what is the implication of this in terms of how we do business and how we operate, and what are they looking out for in terms of eligibility and all of that. So what do you think? When we say we need to be prepared, we need to position ourselves. How do you position yourself when you have very scanty detail about what eligibility means?
Again, I know that in these discussions there would have been some detail.
Okay.
What we've gotten now are snapshots, and I believe that Nigeria would have been represented at these discussions. If we go by what happened in Dubai and where we started talking about Article 6, Article 6 basically is the provision that allows for you to be able to trade in carbon credits. I put it very, very simple. And for countries to create ways, whether sovereign to sovereign or private sector, to be able to sell. So it's the framework to be able to sell carbon credits. And Article 6, as was agreed on, was supposed to be the basis for countries to now go and set up there, and set up their carbon markets. Now, it didn't mean that carbon markets had not existed. For example, what Habiba was saying, there was the CDM, which now doesn't really take center stage anymore, has taken a back seat. And then we are now moving into Article 6. So what happened from Dubai up till now, if I use that as an example as to how the countries position themselves, is that Nigeria, for example, Nextier making moves to establish its carbon market, and there were a number of meetings in that respect. That committee have been formed, presidential committee on this and that. There've been a number of things.
Okay.
So what I would expect is that from our own negotiators, who I expect that our negotiators would have been there, they possibly will be follow up as to how this is structured. But then there's also looking at who the key countries that are going to put money into. There's also the role of following up what these key countries are doing. And when I say following up, as in being informed, even conversing what they are doing, and seeing how we can position ourselves. If, for example, the US, I'm just using an example, the US did, or as Habiba has said, Canada has said that they want to put more to adaptation, then let's put our adaptation projects on the market. Let's engage.
Who should we engage with,
be
though?
part of the conversation.
Okay.
Government always has a route to engage. They know what to do.
I hear you.
They know what to do.
So you are saying that the government by government, if you hear that, for example, if the, I don't know, maybe like you rightly shared, when these negotiations are happening in the rooms, we are mostly
Outside,
observers, and we are
absolutely.
mostly on
Yeah,
the
mostly yes.
in the other meetings happening on the fringes of this major event, right? So sometimes you are allowed into some of the plenaries, but not every time. First,
Not
and
everything.
always give priority to the party people before they give priority to
Exactly.
the observers to come in. Dolapo, if you remember, the Paris Agreement is still another thing that we've been negotiating to even align with until now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this is where I think I am complaining or sad about, because truth be told, we keep having these negotiations religiously, timefully every year. I think we need to take a hard stop at having these negotiations.
You mean stop negotiating?
Let's stop. We've negotiated enough. Let us implement.
Okay.
Honestly,
Um,
because
um,
why do I say that? We negotiated a Paris Agreement that has still not been
Not been fully
completely
implemented. Yeah.
implemented. They negotiated again in Dubai. I mean, there was Glasgow. I can't even remember which comes first, Paris or Glasgow. And there are so many, right? They've just, and every year we are all gathering in one place, spending all these thousands of millions of tons of CO2 just being emitted into the air and converge again and talk again and have another target. And then we go, which supersedes last year's targets. And we still, so you will find that it's just a rolling
Yeah.
cycle that gathers no dust. We need to know when to say, okay, we did a Paris Climate Agreement. Let us sit and implement. Do we need 5 years to implement it? Let's meet next 5 years and see how has that worked. This is my opinion.
Yeah.
Because it's just getting too much. It's getting
I mean,
really,
it's a
it's become a
legitimate,
circus.
yeah, it's a it's a legitimate perspective. I'm wondering whether one way to address this is not. So the point Dolapo made about the government is in the inner room, right? They're there. You know, the knights of the round table, they're always around the round table, and not everybody has access to the round table. But then the governments themselves, who are signatory to the framework and to the conference, who are members of the Conference of Parties, are in the room. So I'm wondering whether it is not the responsibility of the state to come back from a COP and do a debrief to different groups. Because you have your practitioners like yourselves, you have the civil society people, you have people who were not around the table, but who are stakeholders who were at that meeting. And I'm wondering whether the question we're asking, what you're asking, Habiba, whether it's not the responsibility of the state to do what you're asking, to do the debrief, because they have the information.
I totally agree with you. And I think sometimes, I mean, I remember a few COPs ago that I've never been to COP until Dubai, because I was one person that was very against flying all the way and, polluting the atmosphere to go and discuss the climate cleaning. So I just started going to COP in Dubai last year. And I remember that prior to that, most times when all the COPs happened, we always had the Ministry of Environment had these meetings where they had to sit down and discuss.
They do that before they go for meetings, but when they come back,
no, I'm saying even when they come back, I've attended a few in the past.
Oh, really?
I don't know if this year they have a plan, but I think I saw something about COP debrief. I'm trying to remember. No, sorry, that was UN Global Compact that's planning to do that one. So yes, you're very correct. It's very good to sit down and do that debrief. Understand so that we can at least maybe align with Dolapo that said, let us do our own planning. If Canada says they are going to do adaptation, how do we have adaptation projects and know how to present it to Canada so it can be then funded and we can start talking real action? Right? For example, everybody is saying at the most recent COP exactly. For example, Irina was very big on championing that the global renewable mark needs to really go up. In fact, everybody is looking at it as if the whole 300 billion should go into cleaner energy and all of that, right? And Irina is like, okay, let us start doing work.
Who's Irina? I know who they are. But
International Renewable Energy Association.
Okay.
I've started again.
You've started.
Sorry, not association, agency. So, and I know that Irina is going to have a General Assembly next month in January as well.
Okay. Let me pull Dolapo in. Right. So we're still on this positioning and all. And from what you heard back there, what would you say for Nigeria's power sector? What do you think in terms of if the sector were to position to be part of this, what's going on, or to even have access to leverage the opportunities that might be opening up post COP29, what would you say are sort of the priorities? What should the priorities be?
I think for our grid, our infrastructure, use of technology,
Okay.
and human resources.
Okay.
It's very, very, they should be topmost priority.
Okay.
Because we are talking about the grid here. Particularly because we are critical, whether we like it or not, we are critical to the integration even of the grid as a continent.
Absolutely.
I know that there is a plan for an Africa single electricity market. It's a plan. It's a plan. And that's being done by the AUC, for example. And they also have what they call a continental master plan. But obviously, there needs to be lots of work done in the regions and the countries as well for us to be able to achieve such an ambitious plan. Now, if we don't even get our grid in terms of the infrastructure right, and technology, I mean, for how long have we been talking about having scale down our grid? And you know that it's not like our grid is sufficient to meet every need. That's why it is still very, very critical.
Absolutely.
But we need to have a grid that works. I mean, the grid collapses we've had in the past few weeks or months have shown,
I swear, a few weeks,
that there is a problem. And a lot of it is human resources. There are rooms I've been in, which I will not say, where I've heard the kind of ineptitude that's going on there that just does not work. So when I say that those things are priority, then we need to position ourselves in a way that there is obviously a robust, healthy, stable grid with a market structure that works, where you can then call on some of this climate financing or call on financing into the grid. A market structure that works such that if anybody was putting money into transmission, for example, because people are even looking at, even apart from our Electricity Act that enables us now have private transmission, even Africa as a continent is looking at independent transmission as well. And those are backed by market structures and contracts that ensure that anyone who's putting money into that system gets their return. So we talk about being able to access all this money, that is loss and damage and all of that, but there's a lot of work that we ourselves have to do.
Prep work, I completely agree.
And it costs money. And it entails government being very strategic.
And nimble as well.
Yes. So,
yeah. I hear you. I think you raised something really interesting for me, right? I mean, my foray into the power sector on the UKNIAF platform. So there appears to be, so you've said two things. Market structure is one, a functional grid, an efficient grid, a grid that works is another thing I heard you say. Now, I have always been a bit surprised as to why in conversations, most times when you sit in meetings within the sector, there's a lot of talk about the structure of the market. But the question of a functional grid, it doesn't come up as often. I've always found it a bit, I don't hear it talked about as often. And when I asked somebody, the feedback I got was, do you know how much money you're talking? How are we going to afford that? But then, so that's the thing. It's not there.
300 billion will finish there only in Nigeria.
And still not get the problem solved. Okay, Habiba, what should Nigeria do differently after COP29?
The new approach is this distributed electricity. And if you notice, I didn't say renewable electricity alone. If you are going to do a hydropower plant and it is in Jalingo, right? Develop it there, generate the electricity there, and distribute to the people in that area. If you remember, the Nesco is a very good example.
Habiba.
Nesco is that's not an acronym. That's the name. Is a power plant that was done in the early 20s by the Germans in Plateau State, and that thing is still working, albeit at reduced capacity, but it's still working since the 20s. But it was only 7 Plateau States, so that means it is possible, and that's not solar. That's just, I think it's a hydropower plant or something.
Okay. If
it is gas power plants, let us have distributed energy resource such that we do not need a grid to lean on, because the grid is not strong enough. And if we say we're going to clean up, the money we will use to even be doing this, it's even a 10% amount of you will need to clean up the transmission or to fix it and all of that.
Sorry,
so in my opinion.
Yeah, but on that, hold that thought though. Sorry, I don't mean to be rude. Dolapo, do you agree with this?
In a way, I think the grid of the future is centralized, and the grid of the future is smart.
The smart part is the one that absolutely.
We are having conversations where countries are talking about smart grid.
Yes, agreed.
I mean, India is 100% electrified, by the way. It is whether you have the power or not that is the issue. We need to start talking about decentralized and smart grids. Now, whether we can revitalize that grid, it's a very big problem and a huge challenge. And it's not only about slapping money on the. Do we even have the human resources required?
Yeah.
That's exactly it. It's
Yeah.
not about
I
slapping
think-
money, and that's where I want to.
Absolutely.
So if you kind of carved it out, now I would not say maybe per state, and this is where maybe our Electricity Act now gives us an opportunity.
I was actually going there.
If we give
If we go by the letter.
yes, and maybe breaking it up in regions
I
where
completely
you
agree.
can then have it privately run and operated. And when I say privately run and operated, it is that the private sector innovation, private sector expertise comes in there so that you have a structure that works. So
Yes.
I agree with Habiba. It's a matter of structuring.
I agree.
If we keep looking at trying to do this as a big mammoth grid,
Yeah.
we've not been able to.
Absolutely.
We are still trying to procure SCADA. We still don't have a structure for ancillary services, which are critical to reliability of grid.
So in principle, for me, the principle is something has to be done about the grid. I think that's the big headline. That's the news headline there. Now, what that thing is, you're both more versed in the sector, so you probably have a clearer idea of what might work, but something needs to. My own point is that in meetings, that conversation about what's with the grid, which is sort of like the title of the conversation, you don't hear that enough, right? For me. That's my Habiba, back
but
to you.
The truth of the matter is that when you say something needs to be done about the grid, the existing grid is fantastic, right? It's old and fantastic. But it
Fantastic in what way?
Is that in
okay? So in comma, we're all patriotic Nigerians. It's fantastic,
right?
Yeah.
When I say fantastic, I mean it at least gets somewhere.
So that way is cracking up.
It gets somewhere. Why don't we clean up that part of it that is working now? Whatever we're generating. I mean, they said we generate 13 point something megawatts of energy, but we're only getting 4 megawatts of it currently. What can we do to make sure that 13 megawatts is all used, it's efficiently?
We have capacity. We have capacity. They say.
Not that we're generating. We have the capacity.
Not that we have capacity. That entire.
You see. Okay, thank you. Okay, you see. So we have capacity for that. How does Nigeria ensure that what do we need to do now post-COP? Can we sit down and just see and not think about the money for once? Because like we are taught in business school, sometimes you as a business owner, it's actually not the financing that you need. It is knowing how to structure and strategize. Sometimes it's not really the money. Because look at now, for example, I would remember after one business training, I realized that what my business really needed was to generate a lot of sales. And if we can do a lot of sales, then we can actually cover our own running expenses than actually always looking for money. Because in the long run, when funders keep dumping money on you and you have what I call a leaking basket, it will not hold.
But we have all these strategies, Habiba. Nigeria is not bereft of strategies.
Hold on. Even if this 300 billion is coming only to Nigeria, if we are still a basket, it's going to fall through. One thing to have strategies on paper, it's another thing to actually implement, and this is where I'm going. What I'm simply trying to say is, can we sit down and look at the loopholes that are making everything that has been coming into Nigeria not to work efficiently?
That sounds like a mammoth project.
It's a mammoth project, but it's something that baby steps can lead us somewhere. 350 million that came from the World Bank. Honestly, if we sit down and do an analysis of that 350 million, I'm sure what we have achieved and what we could have achieved with that money, even if it was full grants, it's two different worlds apart. What did we do with that? How did we? Can we sit down? We say every connection is $750, right? If it's a mini grid, or even if it is even a solar powered lantern, right? Let's even say everything is $700 per connection is $750. Divide that and see, did it fit 350 million fit that number? How many was it? I think they said they did only, I don't know, I don't have the figures. Let me not say something, but I'm thinking that if we can break that down, then it's like working backwards and saying, what made this one not to be as achieving as we did? I'm hoping, and that's why I started with the dares earlier, that this dares is going to be the one that will smoothen things. Honestly, I know some grids that were done during the previous project, that are broken down. People make a lot of noise about Shimankara. Go to Shimankara, my site is 20 kilometers from there. They constantly do not have energy.
The question I want to ask you is this: assuming I'm a policymaker who really wants to make a difference, and I'm listening to this podcast, I'm looking for baby steps. I can't do something like, let us sit down and start assessing what has been responsible for us having a basket rather than a cement container, right? Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of what little thing can I do in my little space?
What comes to
space. Assuming no, not from you. You're talking to somebody in the policy space who is listening to you.
Let me assume that I'm talking to a commissioner of energy.
Yes. So one little thing that she can do that is within her remit that she can quickly do.
She should just take a stock of what the current energy situation is in her state.
Okay.
Right? Take a stock of it. What is there? What is
stock taking?
What is working? What is not working?
Okay. I'm going to have to
stock taking.
Okay.
Once you see it's stock taking, then you realize because from the stock taking you will know where the grid is up to, where the grid hasn't gotten to, where distributed can go to, and all of that.
Okay.
So you can then design a plan.
I hear you. Dolapo, stock taking. Do you agree?
Stock taking is something that we always have to do.
Yes.
As a country, as businesses, as human beings. I mean, we are getting to the end of the year.
Tell me about it.
So for every person, we need for stock taking. So I think that's inevitable. What I just add to that is importance of planning in our electrification strategy. As a country, on a regional level, on a continental level, on a state level, is so critical. And we're a developing country that has, what are we positioned to be in terms of we are one of the fastest growing countries in terms of population.
Exactly. I was about
we haven't even reached the place where we are saying that people are going to stop having babies. We are not going to be like China or like Japan.
Well, who knows with the current economic,
I didn't even know which one.
The current economic situation in Nigeria is, giving people a bit of a think about how many they have,
so. I hope that
school fees and all.
What will help. I hope that's what will help. But the key thing is we need to plan, and if we have proper plans in terms of what do we need in terms of our energy needs, what do we need in terms of energy security, what are the diverse sources that we can use, what do we need in terms of infrastructure to get it there, and plan this on a rolling basis. That's a way of positioning.
Do you think something like an integrated resource plan would?
Oh yes, that's usually That's usually that's how many states have? I think only Lagos State I know that have. I know Nigeria now. We have one by our law. We are on the journey.
We are just producing. We're like in the process of producing one, the national one.
I know that something was submitted. We haven't seen it. We who are on the other side have not really
seen it. That's the Dolapo, you're not on the other side. Stop it. So
I'm wondering.
You know what I'm saying? Which other side are you talking about? You
have not seen the documents.
No, no. There's a difference. There's the new energy policy and strategic plan. That is the one they call the NEPSIP. That's the one that the law requires the Honorable Minister to submit in the election. Yes. But there's the integrated resource plan, which is the holistic planning. And that one I know is also in motion. I mean, the Federal Ministry of Power and NERC are championing it. I know UKNIAF has been also supporting that process. So are you saying you've not been part of any of the consultations at all?
No, I've just seen it in paper. In fact, when I saw it in papers, I remember reaching out to someone to ask,
oh, wow.
Please, do you have a copy of this report? Yes.
Okay.
Because it's a very important report.
It is.
I speak to other DFIs about.
Do you have it now?
Africa.
I can share what we have so far with
you. Please do, because I don't have it.
Please do. We are looking for it. I also would like to see it.
Yeah, because it'd be good to know what's
because it was about this holistic planning and what are the pathways and scenario building and so if we go this way, what does it take? It contains those sorts. It's been a very intense process that's been going on for almost over 2 years now.
I think communication is
important.
It's also very broken down. Yeah,
I agree.
I think this new regime of whatever are trying. They're trying. I noticed that there's a lot more noise.
New regime of whatever, Habiba.
Yeah, I don't want to say REA or government.
Okay, so final question for you then. You are a pioneer in the area of carbon markets in Nigeria. You've been around the block. Why did you have to go for COP? What was the new learning you acquired there this year?
Oh, okay. So for me, like I shared with you, it's not about the COP really that I went to COP. For the past 3 months, the United States State Department has been doing something for women in energy transition. So where do we play in that energy transition trajectory?
Okay.
So I'm one of the women that they've been talking to and getting information from to build that plan of action towards how do we position women in energy transition.
Okay.
So
it was on that basis.
Yeah, that basis was the reason why the Department of State still invited us to the COP to come and speak to that, and the activity was now launched.
I
So that's
see.
the reason I
Interesting.
went to COP. I agreed to go because I've been involved in that process. And
Okay.
then on the other side, the reason I also wanted to go to COP this year was to also see what else. And I was able to enter one of these plenary meetings. I wanted to really experience the plenary meetings. What do they really do in those negotiations? And I actually experienced one of it. And I attended a few other meetings, and
Okay.
I left. Yeah.
Okay, so that was new. Then for Dolapo, top 3 things you noticed while you were at COP you would like to share?
So, one of the things I noticed was that countries were very deliberate about how they projected themselves.
I see.
I mean, I didn't see this in Dubai, and maybe I didn't pay attention. But I saw a lot of countries who came to sell where they are in terms of, what they are doing to preserve the oceans, what they are doing to preserve the forests.
Very purposeful, eh?
Very, very purposeful. And you could even see it in the way they dressed. It caught attention. I didn't see this in Dubai.
Wow.
And again, maybe because of the way Dubai was structured, because Dubai had a lot of buildings. Or in Azerbaijan, you were in an enclosed place, so you could see a lot. So that could have also.
Okay. The optics were different.
The optics, yes. So you had to know where you were going. But in Azerbaijan, because you were in a whole facility, there was the blue and there was the green zone. Countries were very deliberate as to how they structured themselves, how they were made themselves visible.
Really? Interesting.
And it then showed, again,
is the positioning. The position you were talking about, absolutely.
Where if you as a country or as a donor or whatever, your own position is that you want to help save the seas. Just from that optics, or if you were just going about, you will know the countries that you want to talk. I also so whilst we are still competing for the same scarce resources, some people are positioning themselves.
Absolutely.
Dolapo is not just saying it. She didn't see it in Nigerian stand.
Habiba.
I didn't stay.
Probably Nigeria.
So positioning, what else?
However, I know that there was something that was done by Bielsa.
Okay.
There was an event done by Bielsa and Oyo State.
Okay.
Because they were also trying to position themselves, but it wasn't as elaborate as what I've seen.
It wasn't as catchy.
I knew about the Bielsa and the Oyo State because someone told me that they were going to be at Nigeria stand. So I went there and then but it's not like what I saw
with others.
Yes.
This positioning thing is so important.
They were positioning themselves well.
Yeah.
I also learned that there are special drawing rights that countries can draw on that will not put pressure on their balance sheets. As long as they're eligible.
I hear
and
you.
This was one of the sessions I attended.
You see?
So if we are talking about, we want to improve our grids, and your issue about balance sheets, can we draw up a proposal to be able to attract these drawing rights, so that it's not one that will be on our balance sheet? If we say that we are already leveraged in terms of debt, which we are to a certain extent, can we draw on these drawing rights? Because I learned about this just sitting at
it's really interesting, actually.
I talked about it.
I'm sure a lot of people don't even know about it.
Yeah, and that's the thing I said when I was
the guy with rapt attention as he was saying it. I was looking at him with rapt attention. So, and there was a lot of emphasis on financing because the COP was centered a lot around financing.
Yeah.
Finance, where is the money going?
Yeah.
I've said that private sector have said they are not putting money into projects in the name of private climate finance. That is. One last thing that I noticed is that I was sitting at a session where former President Mrs. Joyce Banda.
Okay.
So I heard her say, I sensed her frustration. Yes, President of Malawi. I sensed her frustration about coming to these COPs and not seeing tangible results. And she did sense her frustration about that. We also know about, I think, 13 countries that they worked of COP as well. So whilst there's a lot of movement, countries are getting quite disillusioned.
I see.
About what's happening. There is a sense of apathy, as well. So those
I hear you. Things. So very important positioning. This whole question of really being aware of and leveraging the opportunities that exist within the space, like the drawing rights and the issue of apathy. Very interesting and very helpful top 3. Habiba sounds like she's just bursting to say something. Famous last words, Habiba.
No.
Okay.
I just wanted to say that I think it's also very important that when we plan for people to go to COP, look at Dolapo was just in one session and she heard about this whole drawing rights and all of that. Sometimes, and this goes back to my saying of the strategy, that sometimes it's not the money that you need, it's actually the sense and the way
The
to
information as well. First of all, knowledge is power.
Somebody's work or a few people's job at the COP can be going around to this session to pick up on information like this, so that when we come back home, we can sit down, draw up a plan, and then do that debrief that you said, and then we all go and start running with it. If they must have COPs every year, then before next COP, we have something tangible that we achieved because of last COP, and we're now showing it at the table, and even being the ones that are driving the conversations,
so
people can see. I mean, I was very happy with the way Nigeria was quite vocal this year. Can we do better by not just being vocal, but showing actionable steps?
Okay. On that positive note, Dolapo, were you saying something?
Yes, just one thing, just
sure.
to something that she said, about that plan. I was sitting on a conversation where someone who attended from another country, but someone who I know well, and said that throughout this call, they were not in the plenaries, but they had people in the plenaries. They had people in negotiation meetings, and they had every day with those people.
Yes.
Advising on what you do.
And these were seasoned technical people who understand the issues. It's not just
7 a.m. in the morning, strategizing. Okay, this is what you say. Oh, this is the feedback we're getting. Okay, this should be the strategy.
Absolutely.
If we are serious about this, and it's not just attendance, these are the kinds of things we should be.
Agreed.
Thank you.
All right. I think that's a good place to put a full stop or a comma, a pause to this very, very interesting conversation. Maybe we'll have Azerbaijan diaries and have a phase 2 of this, because such an interesting conversation. I've learned so much listening to the both of you. I think there is hope. I think that's a good place to leave it. There is hope. And thank you so much, ladies, for your time and for the very interesting reflections. This has been, really good conversation. Thank you for sharing generously from what you learnt as well. Thank you so much, and have a good rest of the day. And to our listening audience, please join us next time on What's with the Grid, a conversation with women in the power sector. Thank you, Nextier, for post-production and for keeping us in check. Bye, everyone, and see you on the next episode.